Welcome to the weekly lesson from Unity Church of Victoria. I'm Vicki Vanderhorst, a licensed Unity teacher. Whether you're a member of our beloved community or just checking us out, we're delighted you found us. If anything you hear doesn't work for you, that's all right. Just simply set it aside. Or, on the other hand, if you hear ideas that resonate with you, take them and apply them and use them to make a positive difference in your life. I hope the lesson you're about to hear will support you on your spiritual journey.
For those of you who don't know, I've been away since September. So this is a very exciting morning for me to be back and reconnect with my spiritual community. Before we do our opening prayer, I'm just going to share with you a story from my travels. I was in India. And this is last month. We were living in a very, very small city, really, or town, on the southeast coast of India, very near to the tip. And in this community, you could find, within 2 kilometers, a circumference of 2 kilometers, you could find there's Hindu temples, there's Muslim mosques, there's a Jewish synagogue that has been there since the 1500s, there's a Jain temple, and there's Christian churches. And this community holds the belief that St. Thomas, one of the apostles, actually lived right in that area and came there in 56 AD, and that he taught there and that he was buried there until they took him off to Rome, or Vatican City. Yeah. So this is a community that's very rich in spiritual identity. And every morning you can hear the church bells ring, and you can hear the Hindu chimes chiming away and the people chanting their morning puja. And you can hear the Muslim call to prayer. And you know that the synagogue is there in their worship group, and the Jains are there also. And all of this happens in a very peaceful community. Now, we happen to be there at Christmas time, and of course, you know, the message of Christmas, peace on earth. And what I realized when I was living there is that there is peace on earth. Now, in many, many places on this planet. Not everywhere, but more than we sometimes remember. It's very easy to forget when we hear about the hot spots. So it's not something that we need to strive for. It's not something that we need to look very far for. That we are already living on a planet that in many ways is very peaceful. And of course that peace, where does that begin? Within us. So, you know, when Doris told me, just not very long ago, what the topics were for January, when she and I decided that I could speak this Sunday, she said we're working from this saying that create what we can with what we have in the vision that God inspires. And I was so excited to hear that, because this is something, if you've been around Doris for a little while, you know that she has these little sayings, right? And this is one that I heard years and years ago, and it has helped me out of a lot of jams. When I just feel like I've gotten stuck, I remember, create what I can with what I have in the vision that God inspires. So I'm so grateful that I got to do this section right here, which is about what we have. So if we look at what we have, we can look around the room right here. I know that we all have the ability and the physical health to be here. And somehow we all got here. So that means we probably have a car or access to a bus or good legs, or perhaps a friend picked us up. And as far as I can tell, everybody has clothing. That's good. So we all got here, we all are dressed. If we wanted to, we probably had something to eat this morning. Already we can see how much we have, even if we just stopped right there. But what happens often is that's just exactly the problem. We do stop right there with what we can see and what we can touch and what we can feel and what are our possessions, our physical possessions. And we think that that is all that we have. And sometimes, I'm guilty of this myself, I may feel like I don't have enough. That there are things lacking in my life. That other people have things that I don't have, that I wish I did. So the outer things are part of what we have, but they're not all of what we have. But it is often where we put our attention and our focus and our energy is on those things. But there is another important aspect of what we have. We are also spiritual beings, created in the image and the likeness of that divine energy, of that divine presence of God. And because we are creations of that being, we inherit everything that the same qualities that God has. And so there is a whole array of other things that we have that we may not, we don't see, we can't possess, but they're ours. They're part of our perfect pattern of creation. We can't be even separated from them. We can feel separate from them. We can put ourselves in a position where we don't perceive them, or we don't believe in them, or we don't acknowledge them, or we can ignore them. But the truth is, we are spiritual beings as much as we are human beings. And all of those aspects of God are part of us. It's closer than our breath, closer than our heartbeat. We don't have to look for them. We don't have to find them. They already are just a part of us as much as our physical body is a part of us. But what happens when we forget that truth, when we're asleep to that reality? We limit ourselves tremendously, because our human energy and our human strength and our human wisdom can only take us so far. And if you're like me, when I get stuck, I just think, I just need to work a little harder. Or if I can't figure out something, I thought, I just need to know more. If I knew more, then I could figure that out. Or if I just had this, then I could do that better. Or if they would just stop doing that, then I could do this. And that energy and that focus and that attention can only bring us so far. And how many times is it that when we are down on our knees, that we remember that there is something bigger and greater and more powerful and more loving than anything that we can see around us? How many times is it that when we have exhausted all the other possibilities, when we don't know what else to do, that we remember that we are one with God? We say it every morning here. We said it this morning, if you read our vision statement, our oneness with God. Some of you may remember that last time I came back from India, I shared a story about the kind of harrowing bus ride that we take from Delhi up into the Himalayas. And it's a 14-hour ride. It takes place overnight. And in a bus that, sometimes you wouldn't see a bus like that around here, but maybe if you watch movies about other parts of the world, you may see these buses and wonder how are they staying together, because they're just kind of going like this. And what I learned in southern India, or no, I didn't learn, but what I assume by what I saw, in southern India, the buses were actually not that bad. And I thought, now I know where they send all the buses that are, aren't suitable. Excuse me, in southern India, they just send them up to the Himalayas. Excuse me. So, it's this 14-hour overnight ride, and part of the challenge of being in this bus is that there's only one bus driver. And he's got his buddies up in there, but they don't actually switch. So it's one driver driving this bus for 14 hours through the night. And as we approach dawn, we're getting higher and higher. And the roads are becoming more and more windy. And what's really bad is that when the sun comes up, you can actually see how far down it's going to be if the bus goes over. Because there's no railings, of course, or anything like that. Excuse me. So it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when I felt like I was sitting right behind the bus driver, and I felt like I could just feel that he's getting tired, and then in reaction to the tiredness was being very aggressive in his driving. And, of course, he's shifting this old bus and, steering this huge steering wheel and going up and down these incredible mountains, the Himalayas. And I thought, I better start praying because I don't think we're going to make it to the top. And, of course, this time I had not only Joseph with me, but also my son. I thought, oh, my gosh, what have I done, So I started saying the prayer of protection, of course, The light of God's, and I'm talking to the driver, the light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you and me, everybody else. The presence of God is watching over us wherever we are, God is. The love of God enfolds you. The light of God surrounds you. And this is, just like a half an hour, I'm just doing this. And then I looked at him and I noticed that in the whole, the bus is quite wide at the front, and he's got pictures up there, and he's got marigolds hanging, and he's got little flashing lights, and picture of Lord Shiva and some other, Hindu gods. I thought, he's a Hindu. I better say some Hindu prayers. Maybe that'll work. So I started saying my Hindu prayers, and I'm just saying the prayers and saying the prayers and saying the prayers, and then I thought, but there's a lot of mostly the bus is filled with Tibetan Buddhists because we're all going up to this town where the Dalai Lama is, and so I started saying my Buddhist prayers, But isn't that how it goes? When we're just desperate and feeling like there's no hope, then we turn to prayer, or we turn to the remembering that God is here in whatever form. Only then. I thought, why wasn't I saying my prayers when we started the bus ride, I'm learning to do that now when I get in the car, say my prayers. First. Not when we're desperate, not when we're, feeling like we're going to die, not when the whole world feels like it's falling apart, or whatever human condition that we're experiencing. And we all, as human beings, experience all those things, and yet we don't remember. That's part of what we have, is that spiritual connection with the divinity that is more powerful and more, I think Karen said in her prayer, vast than we can even imagine. Why not remember that that's what we have too, that we are connected, that we are one with that? So this has been going, this is I think it's a common human experience. I think it's something that perhaps other people in this room have also experienced, that we forget about that. And there's a great story in the Gospels that I'm going to read to you where the disciples also experienced the same thing. And you think, these guys are hanging around with Jesus. And they still, it's like they should be a little wiser, you'd think, or something. So it's a very human story. And before I share this example with you, just want to remind you that in Unity, when we look at these stories, we look at the characters and the situations, and the Bible really as a tool, as a vehicle for self-discovery. And we hopefully can, when I read, I look for myself in these characters and in these situations, because I've been there. And it's nice to know that I'm not the only one who's been there. And sometimes we can learn by what people do that didn't really produce a really great result, or sometimes we can learn, through example, either way, from the stories in the Bible. So this is when the disciples and Jesus are in a boat, in the fishing boat, and they are starting to row across the sea. And a storm comes up. And it says, a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he, Jesus, was in the stern, asleep. And they woke him up, and they said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Jesus woke up and said to the sea, Peace, be still. Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. So that's their experience, They're in a boat. They're fishermen. They know what they're doing. They're experienced. I imagine that seems like only when they're in absolute desperation do they call out to their teacher to help them. They've probably tried everything that they already know. The boat is being swamped. They've done everything they can humanly possibly do. Isn't this the same thing that we do? They just try harder, do more. And then they call out to Jesus, wake up, don't you care that we're dying? And does Jesus say, well, you better, row harder or plug the holes or something like that? No. He says, peace, be still. And I don't know, it says that the sea turned calm, but I also suspect that those words were directed to the disciples as well. So in this story, if you notice, Jesus is in the boat, but he's asleep, quietly sleeping, until he is called upon, until they wake him up. And Jesus represents that Christ presence, that perfect expression of God that is within each one of us. And what happens? We just let it sleep until we're totally desperate and down on our knees. Because that presence, that divine presence, is not going to do things for us. It does not control our lives. We are not puppets. It's going to wait. It's lying in potential. It's going to wait until we activate it, until we call it forth, until we wake it up. It's a beautiful image of that. We only need to wake it up and to activate it. So when we say create what we can with what we have, this Christ presence, this divinity, this God within, whatever you want to call it, is part of what we have. So let's not wait until we're in some desperate straits, when we're drowning, to activate it. We don't need to wait until we feel like we're out of options or possibilities or have exhausted everything and everyone around us. We can wake it up now. There's a great story from the Buddhist tradition where some seekers came to the Buddha and listened to his words and were inspired by the wisdom that they heard. And they said to him, "Well, what are you, God?" And the Buddha says, "No." And they said, "Well, are you a prophet?" The Buddha says, "No." "Perhaps a saint," they say. The Buddha says, "No." And so finally they say, "Well, what are you? Tell us." And the Buddha says, "I am awake." I am awake. That's what we need to be, is awake. Awake to the knowing that we already have an incredible reservoir of strength within us, that we are connected with an infinite supply of opportunities, of wisdom, of knowledge, of strength. There are times in our lives when we feel like we don't have the strength to go on. And that's what we need to remember, that we are connected with an infinite strength, an inner spiritual strength that can carry us through those hard times. That we are connected with the compassion and with the love and the divine energy. There is a wealth of opportunities and resources available to us right now, but we need to wake it up. We need to be aware of it and use it. So that's my goal for this year, is to be awake. Stay awake to the possibilities and the resources and to what I have, which is this beautiful divine connection. Let us pray. Mother, Father God, we are so grateful for this divine connection that we have. And we align ourselves with you and with it so that we remember. So that we remember. And we know that you cannot be used up, that there is no end and there is no separation. And so we remember to call upon you, to call upon that divinity within, to awake, to be active, to be present. This is part of our spiritual inheritance. It is what we have. And so for this, we are truly grateful. We say thank you and amen.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you'd like to know more about us, I invite you to check out our website, unityvictoria.ca, or join us on Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. as we come together for our weekly service in the Victoria Conservatory of Music's Alex Goulden Hall at Quadra and Pandora. God bless and namaste.